you've laid it out so perfectly well in the Liberty Amendments for these so-called smart guys in the think tanks and in the pseudo-conservative media.
Well, notice how they ignore it.
They ignore it, Mark. It's weird. I think part of it is because they just like to sit there and whine and moan.
How you can completely ignore the framers of the Constitution, the ratifiers of the Constitution, a section of the Constitution that is sitting there, that is almost a willing ignorance as far as I'm concerned.
It is, because I think financially it's, they're getting taken care of fine, but what about the rest of the American people? And I'll tell you, Mark, this is my concern, and you've talked about this.
If we cannot rely on state representatives and state senators, which is fundamental to the whole notion of constitutional governance, the 10th Amendment and so forth, and federalism. If we are so fearful, why do we play this game? Then we must support centralized government. We just want less of it. Well, that's never going to happen. The government's not going to restrain itself in Washington. Is there any evidence of that whatsoever?
No, not at all.
Well, then we lost. It's over. The republic's dead. I mean, these people who surrender, who reject the only available constitutional recourse that exists, I don't know what they have in mind. I think there's an intellectual laziness. I think there is an insular attitude. Really, I do. And I think a lot of these guys and gals have been conquered by the very progressive movement they claim to oppose. And so they only think in terms of the federal government. Will the federal government give the states X? Will the federal government allow the states to do Y? No, there are other ways to address this. And it would be nice if they got behind it. I mean, we have the governor of the biggest Republican state in the Union, Texas, who's 100% on board. We have the former senator from Oklahoma, Mr. Fiscal Responsibility, Tom Coburn. We have intellectuals and non-intellectuals on board. But most of all, we have the very men who met in Philadelphia at the Constitutional Convention on board. Are we smarter than them? They said, hey, we're going to put in here an alarm, an emergency alarm, where the people through the state legislatures can address abuses of the federal government. And by the way, George Mason, who came up with the language, also said to avoid violence.
The Founding Fathers knew this might happen. Article 5 of the Constitution gives the states the power to stop a runaway federal government. A convention of states to amend the Constitution. It's the only solution as big as the problem. It's time to stand up, speak up, and show up. Join us at conventionofstates.com.